Mark Glaser with MediaShift. Welcome to Mediatwits number 164. Today we'll be talking about Gawker Media forming a union, a historic vote. 80 out of 107 workers voted to start a union at a digital media outlet, the first time that that's happened. Will it spread to other places? Will more outlets decide to unionize, or is this just a kind of one-time blip? We'll be talking about that on today's podcast in detail. First, a word from our sponsor. Running your own business requires focus, and so does parenting. Mediatwits podcast sponsor NextSpace created a place where parents could give their best quality of attention to both co-working space and childcare space under one roof. Learn more at nextspace.us/nextkids. Also, MediaShift has just launched a new series of online trainings called Digital Ed. We have a great free webinar on June 17th covering how publishers can engage their audience on social media and increase revenues, led by Texas State's Dale Blasingame, sponsored by Acquia. Sign up at bit.ly/socialrevs. So before we get into our discussion about Gawker unionizing, I want to introduce our panel of guests this week. We have Hamilton Nolan joining us from Gawker. Jill Geisler. Hey. Jill Geisler joining us from Loyola University Chicago.
Hello.
Lowell Peterson joining us from the Writers Guild of America.
Hi. How's it going?
Good. And Peter Sterne from Capital New York. So Hamilton, tell us what was the thinking behind starting this union at Gawker? Why do it?
I've been reading about labor issues for a long time, and always kind of philosophically thought that unions were a good thing in the workplace, in every workplace, including ours, and ended up having some conversations with an organizer from the WGA, and just started talking to her about the possibility of organizing our workplace. And it turned out there was a lot of interest here at Gawker Media for it, so it just it happened.
Why was there so much interest there? I mean, we all think about kind of the early days of Gawker and a lot of these other online outlets is just kind of churning out tons of content, working writers, kind of burning them out really quickly and like moving on to the next young writer. But it seems like things have changed a little bit since then. I mean, is it still like it there?
No, I don't think it's like that too much at all now. I mean, the media has changed a lot since Gawker started, and it's actually a really good place to work. There's actually a pretty high level of job satisfaction here. But there were certain issues that people in the workplace had. For example, people would like some sort of rational pay scale. People would like some sort of system for getting raises. People would like severance pay. It's a place that has not really fully organized itself, probably because of the sort of organic way that it grew up as a business. So this is sort of part of helping the company grow up, I think.
Yeah. And you also have support from Nick Denton. I mean, he seems to be pretty positive and almost pro-union in a way. It's almost like he was rooting for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know how Nick was gonna. I don't know, Nick. Nick was great throughout the process. He was definitely. Nobody in management interfered in the union drive. Nobody opposed us in the union drive. Nick has made some very positive comments, and I've been really happy with the way that Nick is. I've been actually very impressed by Nick as a being a lefty radical. Nick Denton, like the new incarnation of him. So we'll see how it goes once we get through the contract negotiation phase. Yes, Nick has been very supportive so far.
Yeah, I guess the proof is in the pudding when you actually get down to negotiating, really. Jill, what do you think? I mean, do you think there's and we're hearing that there's some interest from other places to unionize. Do you think that would happen?
I think that people are going to be watching Hamilton very closely, and what he says about the bargaining table is really the most important part. You've already gotten over the hump by having a 75% positive response. When you go to the bargaining table, now you're going to be looking at, you're representing everybody's interests. And that's going to put pressure both on the union members, who will have differences of opinion about what are the priorities should be, and it's also going to test your bosses, because as a good manager, a good leader of mine said, unions weren't formed because management treated the employees too well. There is an implied criticism of the current status quo anytime you go to the table. And frequently, as Hamilton talked about, we're looking at things like severance. In today's sort of free agent environment, people aren't always looking at a job for life, but what they are looking at is how they're going to be treated in an economic downturn. And there's going to be some conversation about salaries, of course, but also about working conditions, about liability, about safety, about how people are going to be held accountable in performance management. Is there an equitable way, if I'm underperforming, am I going to be just, somebody's going to tap me on the shoulder one day and say, you know what, you're not cutting it? Or is there a process here by which someone could actually give me feedback and give me a little guidance before I discover too late that I'm not giving you what you want? And those are the kinds of things that unions usually want in an organization. That, and also some flexibility, or at least predictability in scheduling. Frequently, especially in startups, people are working 24/7, and you're at the sort of at the beck and call of your leadership. And that's fun for a while. It's not fun when you don't know from day to day whether you can plan to take a few days off or to have a life.
Yeah, that's true. But what about for management? I mean, how does this limit their flexibility in having to deal with a union? Does it mean they have to move slower in somewhere, or could this possibly hurt their business beyond just having to possibly pay people more?
Well, there's going to become a process for doing things, and the process isn't just what I, as your manager, want to do. I may have to consult with someone before I unilaterally make a decision that's going to change some procedure that we have here. I doubt that Hamilton is going to be chasing after very exclusive jurisdiction, that only certain people can do certain things, because that's old school union. Those are the unions that I belong to, that I was a steward of, and ultimately became management. But many times jurisdiction was really important. But now, I think, again, I don't want to speak for Hamilton, but I think people have so many skills that they're going to be probably not going to ask for some of the same things. Like, I only write, I don't take, pictures. Hamilton, you're not going for that, are you?
No, I mean, there's actually been really strong agreement through the whole process here that people don't want to really screw with the way that we work at Gawker. I mean, the reason people like this job, and most people do like this job, a lot of it's due to the freedom that we have, not only the editorial freedom we have to write what we want and to pursue the kind of stories we want, but also, it's a relaxed workplace. And we've been pretty unified in saying from the beginning that we don't want to really clog up the way we work with a lot of rules. We want to be very careful about what we do and don't put in the contract.
So, are you really, like Jill said, are you really looking for kind of a new kind of union that's a little different than what you would see at, let's say, a newspaper or kind of a legacy media?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not going to be like a newspaper union. I mean, it's a somewhat different business, and and that said, every workplace is different. I mean, Gawker Media is a relatively happy workplace. That's not true even at every new media workplace. I mean, there are some of our competitors that probably have more of those kind of workplace conditions that would lead to the employees really wanting to put some rules in the contract, giving themselves a life outside of work. I think we're going to try to be very choosy about what we do and don't put in. People who've had experience in unions have talked about how those rules can build on themselves and cause problems in the workplace. So hopefully, yeah, we're going to be intelligent about the way we do it.
Yeah. And Peter, what do you think about the potential for this to kind of spread to other digital media outlets? I mean, do you think there's a chance that this will happen and that there are some unhappy workplaces that might try to unionize?
I mean, I think there are definitely unhappy workplaces that want to unionize. The question is going to be whether they're able to. Obviously, Gawker is very unique in that Nick Denton and Tommy Craig, the executive editor, pretty much everyone in management supported the establishment of this union. So the problem when you're looking at a company like Vice or BuzzFeed is people might be unhappy and might want to unionize. It might not be as great a working environment as Gawker, but that also means that there's going to be less support from management, so it's going to be more difficult for them to unionize. I also think that when you're talking about companies like the BuzzFeed, you have so many more employees. You know, at Gawker, and I think Hamilton can attest to this, it was tough enough trying to keep just 110, 120 employees in the loop. It would be much tougher to try and get the necessary amount of people to vote in favor of unionizing when you have 1,000, 2,000 employees.
Yeah, are there some blocks to trying to do that in other places, Jill? Do you think just because they're larger and kind of harder to organize?
Well, national labor relations law protects people who are organizing, provided that they are quite publicly organizing. And so I know that Gawker didn't use an NLRB process, but you are still protected by the NLRB. But that doesn't mean that managers make it easy. And one of the things that oftentimes there are is campaigns, information campaigns, designed to let people know within the law what the negative aspects, perceived negative aspects might be of union membership, which can mean you're going to lose your individual ability you may lose your individual ability to bargain on your own behalf, or you may have to pay dues that support other even political activities you don't believe in. Those are some of the things that management will talk about. They have to be very careful about saying anything that seems like a threat, that this could result in mass layoffs. They can say that there could be economic downsides to this, leaving that little impression hang in the air. And there are people who truly believe, I don't want anybody speaking for me. I want to speak for myself. Clearly, 75% of the people at Gawker said there is strength in numbers, and collectively we can do better. People who oftentimes negotiate say, look, we'll negotiate what the floor is. No one will earn less than this. You can't necessarily negotiate a ceiling, and you don't necessarily want to, because you want to leave that gap open for extraordinary performers or performance to get compensated in some way.
How does it work? I mean, I think about startups and kind of in the tech world, they, give out stock options, and you're basically kind of a partial owner to the company in a way. So doesn't it in a way, does that mean, we're all in this together? There shouldn't be an us and them between management and workers.
We do have stock options. Some people at Gawker have stock options. It's obviously it's not a public company, it's a private company, so it's a bit different. And I think the good thing about this process is, and going back to the reaction we got from Nick, is I think this process is actually going to increase the unity in the sense of we're all in this together. Hopefully, if you can have a model of management and the workers in a union working together to try to make this company better, I think that's a great example for everyone. And going back to the point that as Peter said, when it comes to trying to organize other companies that are bigger than us, I'm sure it will be many times more of a headache based on the number of employees. But to me, just speaking for myself, I think that it's going to be really meaningful just to get to a point where somebody can go to Arianna Huffington and say, do you support your workers unionizing? I would like to hear Arianna Huffington answer that question. I would like to hear Shane Smith from Vice answer that question, because these companies are run by people who tend to be or tend to present themselves as fairly progressive, and here's an opportunity for them to live that in the real world. So
right, it might be a little more difficult to be progressive when it's in your own backyard.
Yeah.
And I mean, is that something that the stock options you mentioned, some people have them, some don't? Is that something that people might ask for, that more people can get options?
the way they do it now is you can sort of purchase options with some of your bonus and stuff like that. So I believe they're available to everybody. I would have to look into it. That hasn't been a big issue that's been raised, but certainly if people want that, it's a pretty, I have some stock options, not a ton, but maybe that's a vote of confidence that the union's not going to bring the company crumbling down.
Right.
And even in traditional newsrooms, there could be stock options for people, even in employee-owned and union organizations. For many years, the Milwaukee Journal and the Milwaukee Sentinel were employee-owned, and people could buy stock options.
Right. So it's interesting.
And they had unions.
Right. So you're an owner, but you're also an employee that has a union. So it's kind of an interesting standard there. So now there's this conference that's some labor journalists are now bringing together in Louisville in the fall and trying to kind of bring some people together to try to spread organizing to more outlets. I know, Peter, you covered this a little bit. What do you think about these guys, gathering? Is this something, are they're obviously trying to turn this into a movement? Do you think they have a chance, or do you think this is going to be hard?
I mean, one of the organizers, Mike Elk, has previously organized, I believe, he hoped to organize In These Times. Now that he's working at Politico, he's trying to organize Politico. He is definitely part of a movement of reporters who have experience with unions and would like to unionize digital media outlets. As far as how successful they're going to be, it's hard to tell. Certainly, it seemed like they would have very little success before the success at Gawker, which I think has shown people that it is possible to organize digital media companies. And there are definitely a kind of a vanguard of reporters who want to organize digital media companies. And I think that is what you'll see in Louisville. Hopefully, you'll have people from different organizations and different companies getting together to discuss the best ways to unionize digital media companies. I think that in some ways it's unrealistic to expect that all of digital media is going to unionize, but I think that it's definitely likely that Gawker will not be the only one. And I think that over the next few years, you will see more reporters and more digital media reporters try to organize their workplaces.
Yeah, it seems like it just from the interest. I know Lowell's had some technical issues and hasn't been able to join us, but we have heard that there is some interest that they've heard from some other outlets and some other workers who are interested in doing this. So it does seem like something that might spread to other places.
I've heard from
go ahead, Peter.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I've heard from both Lowell and from Bernie Lunzer at the News Guild that they've been talking to lots of digital media outlets and employees at digital media outlets, and there were a few live drives. No one knows about them because in general you don't advertise a union drive. Hamilton Nolan, that was one thing that Gawker did differently, is you publicly said we're going to try to organize a company. In most companies that doesn't happen. So there are definitely some union drives going on that we just don't know about yet, and we'll see whether or not they succeed.
Yeah, we had to talk about it publicly because once we had the first big meeting, it was, if 50 people at Gawker Media know about something, it's going to go out and somebody's going to probably give it to Peter Sterne and he's going to write a story about it. So, we kind of we decided to write it ourselves. Yeah, it's definitely not the typical route, and it can cause some headaches. But I think for us, it really worked out well because, at the end of the day, the fact that we were so public about it kind of constituted this document that anybody can look at and say, look, here's what everybody thought through this whole process, and it obviously wasn't completely pretty all the way through. I mean, all the objections were on the table as well as the arguments for, and there were a lot of objections and there was a lot of talking to people individually to try to work through all these objections that people had, but hopefully the fact that we did it in a somewhat public way can help out the next person who tries to do it, I hope.
Hamilton, Could I ask, what would be what was the best advice you received during the organizing process, and what advice would you give to others who want to?
I am not an organizer, obviously. I'm just a writer, so I've never been accused of being organized. We were, all of us, and this was not just me, obviously, like many Gawker Media employees were very involved in the organizing effort here. I think that one thing that I really was surprised by was learning how hard it is to communicate with a large group of people effectively. It's not just the kind of thing where you can send out a group email and everybody gets it and then you can move on. People really, a lot of the objections that we had during this process weren't so much objections to the existence of a union as they were people feeling like their voice wasn't heard. They didn't get a chance to fully participate in the conversation that was going on. So a lot of the work at the end of our union drive was really trying to reach out to everybody and try to make sure that people could not just hear all the facts about what's going to happen, but also to say what they wanted to say. So it's a bit of a slog, and it takes a lot of really one-on-one effort from a lot of organizers. A lot of people who want it to happen have to put in a lot of time reaching out to everybody and make sure that everybody feels like, okay, my voice has been heard, and now I'm comfortable voting yes, because there's an element of trust that people have to vote for this. You say I'm kind of throwing in with the rest of you guys. I'm putting my future in with you people, so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
If I may, Mark, one of the things that I think served everyone well was the transparency of this process. And one of your challenges, Hamilton, I think you're going to have is transparency while you're at the bargaining table. Because there's a lot of back and forth during union negotiations, some of it not pretty, and some of it test balloons. And your process is going to be watched very carefully there. So I hope you're giving some thought to how you're going to do that, both as I don't know if you put your committee together, but how you will keep not only your team, the rest of the employees informed, but then how that will or will not be shared, because sausage can get really ugly while it's being made.
Yeah, as we know at Gawker, that's what we specialize in. We have not put together our bargaining committee yet, but I'm pretty optimistic that the mistakes that we made in the first part of this process are going to help us be better going through the next part of the process. But we'll see.
The other thing, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Peter.
I just was going to comment on the sort of bargaining process at Gawker. One thing that I saw reading through the objections to the idea of unionizing was that people were concerned that they would not be able to approve what eventually went into the contract, but they still wouldn't be able to decide on exactly what you would negotiate for, because as Jill says, there's a lot of horse trading involved when you're negotiating with the company. And some people seem to say that, well, we'll be able to approve everything. But that's not really how a union works. I mean, you will have to negotiate, and then it'll either be approved or not, right?
Yeah, it's a negotiation, obviously, and the whole process it's really a democracy in action. And like they say, democracy is the worst system except for all the other ones. So there has been some talk. And I can't say anything definitively because we just haven't got that far yet. But there's been some support for saying let's have a sort of supermajority rule for things that we want to put in the contract. So we're not going to have a situation where 49% of the people are unhappy with something that we've put in the contract. Maybe we want to get 2/3 or something like that. So I think that the issues here, there's a lot of unity around several main issues that people want, and there's also unity around people saying we want to make a big push to have everybody involved in this process. So I'm optimistic. I don't think I have any illusions that it's going to be perfect, but those things combined with the fact that management has not been really contentious with us so far, hopefully will help it work out.
Well, that's important because there's always an end game in negotiations, and what clout you have is somewhat limited. I doubt that your membership is entertaining the idea that if they don't get what they want, they're going to walk. Because what we recognize today is that the pool of labor that exists is pretty vast. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of unemployed journalists who, envy your jobs. So I don't think that's the first choice that you want. And, intractable management can drag out negotiations for a long time, which is why I go back to transparency being actually one of your key attributes that could also help you, because most organizations, most businesses want to be known for the goodwill that right now Nick Denton is getting, right? That he has not gotten in the way of anything so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for Nick to get some goodwill out of this. I think he deserves it based on the way he's acted, and I didn't know what his reaction was going to be to this, so I've been pleasantly surprised by that. And when it comes to transparency, that's the way Gawker Media has always conducted itself. It's always tried to be super transparent about everything that happens here. We try to kind of treat ourselves the way that we treat the rest of the world. So I don't have any doubt that that's going to continue, even when it's a headache.
And so what you wouldn't, as Jill was saying, you wouldn't actually consider a strike, would you?
I don't anticipate that being something that is going to come up in this bargaining process, because I think that we're going to go through the bargaining process just fine. I mean, if you're asking a philosophical question about, unions can strike, so that's a tool in the toolbox of any union. I don't think we're going to be on strike, and I don't anticipate us having to threaten a strike, and I don't think it's going to go like that, But yeah. At the same time, when you talk about, I also don't think that writers at Gawker Media are any more replaceable than writers at the New York Times or anywhere else, because this is an industry that's growing up. It's not the kind of thing where you can just rotate people in and out. So I think structurally we have the same positives and negatives of any union, definitely in journalism union. But no, I don't think that a strike is going to be a thing that we have to worry about this time around.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for the discussion. I appreciate you joining us. I want to thank our guests, Hamilton Nolan at Gawker, Jill Geisler at Loyola University Chicago, Peter Sterne at Capital New York, Jefferson Yen, our producer. Sorry that we couldn't get Lowell Peterson connected to us. But you can catch us each and every week on the Mediatwits at MediaShift at MediaShift.org. I want to thank our sponsors, Next Space and Next Kids co-working space. You can learn more about their program at nextspace.us/nextkids. We'll catch you next week.